Well, good morning. How's everybody doing? Good? Good? Do you feel like you're dragging a little bit? Just feel a little draggy? Yeah, I do. A little tired. I really should have drank some caffeine. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. There you go.
How are you looking for your music?
I know. I switched it up. This is the one I need? Okay, great. Yeah. Oh my goodness, I'm getting old. Do what? That ain't old. What would old be? With that? Yeah, gotcha. It's all relative to how old you are. Well, I'm just glad there's still people older than me. Yeah, that's what I'm glad of. Can I have a little more light in the room so I can see people? I get kind of nervous when I sing, and I'll tell you why. This is the real reason. You've got people like Nate and Heather and Matt that just did an awesome job, and we just have other really good worship teams. They're awesome, yeah. And then it's me. They're really good, but then you get kind of nervous. But this is a song that is part of my story, and it has to do with Jesus and the sacrifice he made for us on the cross. All the money in the world couldn't buy me grace, like your blood bought it for me on that day. I've searched the world and all its gold, but it never gave peace to my soul. I found grace and I found love. I found hope on a wooden cross. By your pain and by your blood, who I am ain't who I was. All the love in the world couldn't pay my sins, like the blood-stained cross on Calvary did. I was chained down, way down in my debt, but I found the key in the nail-scarred hands. I found grace and I found love. I found hope on a wooden cross. By your pain and by your blood, who I am ain't who I was. I found grace and I found love. I found hope on a wooden cross. By your pain and by your blood, who I am ain't who I was. All the money in the world couldn't buy me grace, like your blood bought it for me on that day. So with that in mind, turning your Bibles to Psalm chapter 40. Psalm chapter 40. Psalm chapter 40. When you start reading Psalm chapter 40, you don't know it yet. But this is a psalm that answers the question, has God forgotten me? Has God forgotten me? And I think this is a question from time to time that people ask. Has God forgotten me? Now, you might have asked that question over like a period of several days. Or you might be a person that every now and then it just flashes through your mind and you say no because of your faith. But if you're human and a Christian, from time to time, you wonder if God has forgotten you, if he is still focused on you, if he is still involved in your life. Like it can be a snap, it can be long, whatever. So this psalm answers that question, and it's intended to do so. And so verse 1 says this: I waited patiently for the Lord. By the way, that particular word waited means I waited and waited and waited in the Hebrew. Actually, the word waited in Hebrew is used several times right there. We just narrow it down to one, but it's basically I waited and I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined to me and heard my cry. He drew me up from the pit of destruction, out of the miry bog, and set my feet upon a rock, making my steps secure. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. So in verse 3, the thing that popped out at me as I read through this psalm, the first thing is, he put a new song in my mouth. Now the tendency right here is for us to start talking about new songs and how new songs are good and old songs are good and do that sort of trail. You know, run that rabbit for a little bit in the forest and then try to figure out where we're at after the rabbit's gone, right? So it's kind of that sort of thing. But that's not exactly what David is talking about here. He's saying God has put a new song in my heart. He's not saying that I have written a new praise song because of what God has done. He's saying that somehow God has placed a song within me. And what else has God done here? Well, in verse 1, it says, he inclined to me. That means he bent down. He heard me. He was interested in me. While I waited, he was still leaning in to hear what I had to say, and he heard my cry. Another thing that God did in this passage is he drew me up from the pit of destruction and out of the miry bog and set my feet upon a rock, making my steps secure. So he drew me up and he placed me on a rock and made my steps secure. Verse 2 is really a metaphor. That's what it is. We know that there's no place in David's life where God ever drew him up out of the pit. There's never been a place in David's life where he was thrown into a pit. You see, Joseph was thrown into a pit. So if Joseph had wrote this, we could have taken this a little bit differently. Jeremiah was thrown into a pit. If it had been Jeremiah, we could have taken this a little bit differently. But this is a picture of God's salvation, and this is how he felt. When I read it, initially my thoughts are when I was lost and in a pit of despair and sin and destruction. And Jesus Christ came and sought me out. I heard the gospel, and when I accepted him as my Savior, he pulled me up out of the pit. That's what I think about initially. David is thinking about, yes, that type of salvation, but he's also thinking about other times in his life where God came to his rescue, where he felt like he was in a pit, where he felt like he was in a miry bog, where he needed somebody to lift him up on the rock and save him because he could not save himself. He was attacked by enemies. God came in and saved him. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you were in a pit? Have you ever had a situation where you didn't even know the pit was there, but you fell into it? Have you ever had a situation where you thought you're just walking along and somebody put a piece of carpet right here and all of a sudden, whoop, boom, you're in a pit. And it's a pit of despair and you don't feel good about it. You feel like things aren't going well and everything that you're thinking about is negative. Have you ever had that moment where everything is negative? And you're just in that pit and it's just
awful. It's just absolutely awful. And you're waiting on God to rescue you, but you're not praising the Lord for what he's done. You just want to be rescued out of the pit because you're so much in despair. And all you can think about is the walls of that pit and the ugly stuff that's happening. And in fact, you think about it so much, you make up stuff about the stuff that's happening. Can we just be honest and say that we make up stuff about our stuff? We make our stuff worse than it really is. We exaggerate it to get, some type of emotional connection with people. Can we just be honest and say that? And so that's the type of pit that David is describing. I've been in a pit where things were bad and I made them worse. In fact, that particular phrase, out of the miry bog, is actually out of the miry bog of my mind. My mind has made stuff worse than it actually is, but I waited patiently for the Lord to pull me out, and he did. And what he did is when he pulled me out, he not only set my feet upon a rock, it says, he not only made my steps secure, but he put a new song in my heart. In other words, God changed my tune. God changed my tune. It's not a song that we're going to sing. He just changed my tune. Have you ever had a moment where your tune just needed to be changed? Where your attitude just needed to be adjusted? Like you had a bad attitude, woke up on the wrong side of the bed 1 hour earlier than you should have woken up. Can't the government do something about this? Can't we please just have the same time all the time? Come on, Trump. You rename stuff. Let's get this done, right? Yeah. Let's get this done. Wow. Well, first service, I'll let you know, it was, dragged in that service. People were dragging. I was dragging. I'm not going to even go any further than that because I didn't like the way that was going. Yeah. So we were just slow and sluggard and just couldn't get it together rhythm. And then about halfway through the service, there were some kids in the room, and I love kids in the room, so don't take this wrong. But the kids woke up. Like at first, they were kind of nice, calm, and cool, and collective because they woke up early, right? You're a mom, you know this. Yeah? And they're just sitting there, and then all of a sudden, boom, we're supposed to be awake. So, yeah, I think for the sake of kids and the elderly, we should just do away with this time thing. This has nothing to do with Psalm 40, okay? But maybe God just needs to change my tune, right? Sometimes we get so tired and we get so involved in whatever bad is going on that we need God not only to save us out of the pit, but change our tune from the pit. Aren't you glad that God does extra stuff for you? Aren't you glad? Like when you're in the pit, you just want him to bring you out of the pit and set you on solid ground. He goes the extra step and changes your attitude. And so he's given me a new song. He's put a fresh attitude in my life, and I am so thankful is what the psalmist is saying. So he says, a song of praise to our God. I can now see his involvement in my life, and many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. Then verse 4 is kind of a beatitude. Blessed is the man who makes the Lord his trust, who does not turn to the proud, to those who go astray after a lie. Then verse 5, you have multiplied, O Lord my God, your wondrous deeds and your thoughts toward us. None can compare with you. I will proclaim and tell of them, yet they are more than can be told. There's a lot of stuff that you're doing in my direction, Lord, and I'm thankful. Verse 6 says, in sacrifice and offering you have not delighted, but you have given me an open ear. Burnt offering and sin offering you have not required. Now, the makeup of that particular verse is interesting because usually the makeup of that verse is something that's used in a whole psalm or a whole poem or whatever in Scripture. And so what he's done here in that particular verse is he said, the sacrifice and offering you have not delighted, so that's negative. And then he says, you have given me an open ear, which is right here. And then right below that, kin to the first one, is burnt offering and sin offering you have not required. And so you're not delighting here, Lord, and you're not requiring me to do a burnt offering in order for my ears to be open to hear what you have to say. That's what he's communicating in the passage. He is saying, I don't have to sacrifice because you don't delight in that. I didn't have to sacrifice. You don't delight in that. I don't have to do a burnt offering. You do not require that in order for you to speak to my heart, to me in general. That's how that is. So how does that relate? Well, who is the one that has given you the open ear? Who is it? It's God, right? God has given you the open ear. You know what God delights in? He delights in people that listen to him. God delights in people that listen to him. That's why this is structured this way. You don't delight, you don't require, but you open up people's ears because God delights in people that listen to him, and he delights in people that listen and do what he has to say. Verse 6, you've not delighted, burnt offering and sin offering you have not required. In fact, God requires you to try to listen to him. So he delights and he gives that open ear. How many times have you and I really wanted God to listen to us and we didn't feel like he was listening to us? A lot of times. If you're in the room and you're saying that I know that God has listened to me every time, you haven't prayed enough. Okay, can it just be that honest? You haven't prayed enough. And here's why. There's sometimes I've prayed for stuff over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and God didn't answer my prayer. And in fact, there's some prayers that I have that he still hasn't answered, but I really want him to answer. And I know we can go down the road that he's saying no, but I really think that this is something that he would like to do. Right? This is something that I think God would really like to do. Feel like it fits into his plan. I really want him to do this, and I keep asking over and over again. And it's in those times that you ask over and over and over and over again that you're thinking, is he even listening to me? Is he listening to what I have to say? And then one step further, Lord, if you're not listening to me, can you please tell me why you're not listening to me? Like, I'm listening for that. Like, why aren't you listening to me? Is there a sin in my life that's causing you not to listen to me? Can you just tell me what that sin is so I can ask forgiveness of it and move on? Can you do that? Lord, I don't think you're listening to me, so can't you just let me know? Maybe I'm not looking at the right scriptures in the Bible. Maybe I'm not, going to church enough. Maybe I'm not, concentrating enough on what that guy is saying on a day where I lost an hour of sleep. Yeah, maybe I'm just too tired. Maybe, Lord, maybe that's the reason I can't hear. I don't know. Can you please help me hear you? The actual translation of you have given me an open ear is actually, in the Hebrew, you have bored a hole to make it open so I can hear. It would be something like in those days where they would have piping, and maybe the piping would break and dirt would get into the piping, and then it would cause the piping not to flow. Or not to be sick, but when they were trying to get the waste out of the city, some type of tree or some dirt fell into the little trough that was going out of the city, and it stopped it, and they needed to unstop it. All right, track it. So you would bore the hole, you would open it up so that the waste would flow, or you would open it up so the clean water could come from the stream into your city so that you would have clean water in the city. Is everybody with me? So this is I can't hear you, so I need somebody to bore so I can hear you. So it's kind of bored into the ear and it opens it up so that you can hear. So the psalmist is saying, you have given me an open ear. This implies that he has asked for an open ear. And what the psalmist has realized is that God has given him an open ear without a sacrifice. He has given him an open ear without a burnt and sin offering. He's allowed him to hear. what God has to say to him. Interesting principle in the Bible. Sometimes God is not going to be heard until he's ready to be heard. Sometimes God isn't going to be heard until he's ready to be heard. One step beyond that is this. God does, however, want to be heard. See, you and I have a relationship with God. And a relationship requires communication. And our communication with God is not just a one-way street. God speaks to us. Sometimes he speaks in a voice, and I know that makes Baptists very kind of, you get the EBGBs because maybe we're going charismatic, not going charismatic. I might jump around some, but I'm not charismatic, not at all. But that's not what I'm saying. He does speak to you. Sometimes he speaks to your heart and gives you an impression. Sometimes he tells you something out of his word, but God communicates with you. You have to be listening for him, though, to do that, because it's a communication thing. I would liken it to my marriage relationship. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that either one of us or God don't take that way, but Nicole uses a lot of words. I do not use as many words as she does. And if you're married, chances are, unless you got just a weird combination where the woman is silent and the man really talks, generally speaking, the women speak a lot and men do not speak a lot. Okay? That's it. However, the key here is they both are speaking to each other. I'm not making fun of women. I'm not making fun of men. I'm just saying that's the way it is. One person speaks a lot, the other person doesn't. In a prayer relationship with God, do you know who speaks the most? We do. We do. We pray to God. We ask him questions. We continually talk to him. He doesn't speak as often as we speak to him. At least that should be the way it is. If God is speaking more than you're speaking to him, there's a prayer problem. There's a prayer problem. God doesn't speak as often because people that have wisdom do not speak as often as people who don't. Now, I said this in the first service, and just in case my wife is listening to this one, just to make sure, I'm not saying that you're the one, I'm not saying that I'm God and you're not. That's not what I'm saying, okay? Okay, that worked in the first service. They were actually awake enough to laugh at that one. Okay. So God just doesn't speak as often, but you have to hear. And if you cannot hear him, what you need to ask him to do is to bore your ears open. You pray to the Lord and you ask him to open your ears so that he can hear, so that you can hear him. Yeah. From time to time, I go hear other speakers, and I sit in a room and we worship and they preach and it's all good. Every now and then I go to a place where I'm just not feeling it. Have you ever been to church and you just didn't feel it? Right? And so all during the music you just didn't feel it. Other people were, so you knew it wasn't you. I mean, you knew it wasn't them. You knew it was you. I said that wrong. You knew it wasn't them. You knew it was you, right? Just wasn't feeling it. Listen, I missed an hour's sleep last night. Did you? It's working on me. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that, yeah. So the preacher gets up and he starts to speak, and I'm just not into what he's doing. You know, it's not the preacher's fault. In that moment, I went to a worship service to connect with God, and if I'm not really feeling what he's saying, in that moment I say, Lord, just please open my ears and speak to me from what's going on in this room right now. And just about every time, God opens my ears and I hear something that I needed. That's what you have to do if you can't hear the Lord. He actually unstops your ear so that you can hear what he has to say to you. So he is the one that has to do that. The psalm kind of keeps going. We're going to jump down to verse 16. And it says this, may all who seek you rejoice and be glad in you. May those who love your salvation say continually, great is the Lord. This is a blessing that is pronounced on people that are seeking God. And David is saying, may all who seek you rejoice and be glad in you. In other words, may all that seek you actually find you. May they actually find you and connect with you. May they actually find you and they feel you and they know that you're with them. Let them connect. Let all that, because when we connect with God, that is the moment that we are glad. That is the moment that we are happy. That is the moment that we feel secure. That's actually the moment that we feel like our feet are on a rock. That's actually the moment that we feel like our feet are secure. That's actually the moment that our attitude changes and that new song is in our hearts. We seek, and it's joy, and so seek him. So if you can't find the Lord, you seek after him. You pray for him to open your ears, and you seek after him, because God is always there with you. The psalmist does talk about that. In verse 5, it says, you have multiplied, O Lord my God, your wondrous deeds and your thoughts toward us. You have multiplied your wondrous deeds and your thoughts toward us. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of deeds that God is doing for you, and they're great deeds that he's doing for you. There's a lot of thoughts that God has towards you. He thinks about you often. He hasn't forgotten you. A lot of them. Your wondrous deeds and your thoughts toward us, if you go back to the first part, you have multiplied your wondrous deeds and your thoughts toward us. None can compare with you and what you are doing for me. So if you ever wonder, God has forgotten you, he hasn't. He is constantly doing good things for you. Constantly. You might not see it, but he's constantly doing good things for you. He's constantly blessing you. He is constantly thinking about you. His thoughts are on you. Verse 17 follows this up. It says, as for me, I am poor and needy, but the Lord takes thought for me. You see, when you are running from God, he is still thinking about you. When you are running toward God, he is still thinking about you. His thoughts are always toward you. When you have fallen into a pit, God's thoughts are right on you. He's thinking about you. He is sending good deeds your way. He is leaning in. He's listening to what you have to say. He is still thinking about you. He has not forgotten you. You see, God's memory is amazing. Our memory, not so much. Not so much. People often forget God. Good Christians often forget God. They go about their day, they just forget him in this particular situation. And when they forget God, sometimes that's the reason that they fall into a pit. I can't tell you how many pits I've fallen into because I didn't think about God that particular moment. You want me to give you an example? Want me to give you one of those? Have you ever had the words fly out of your mouth? And the pit just opened for you? Yeah? That's the moment I forgot God to control my mouth. And boom. Yeah. Dig. You know. Anybody ever tell you where you're digging it deeper? Yeah. That's part of it. When you forget God, you fall into a pit. God never, ever forgets you. He never does. His thoughts are always on you. If you're married, wouldn't you like it if your spouse thought about you just a little bit more? Mm-hmm. The women in the room are going, yes, yes. The men in the room aren't shaking their heads, but inside they're thinking, yes. Right, honey? No, I'm just kidding. Yes, they're thinking yes in the side. You want people that love you. Wouldn't you like it if your kids that have left the nest and are living on their own, wouldn't you like it if they thought about you just a little bit more? Yeah. Maybe some of you, it's very fresh and you're glad they're gone. I don't know. Maybe that's it. But you would like them to think about you? Yeah. Here is a God that is constantly thinking about you, and you can take it to the bank. His thought is always on you, and he has your best interest in mind. God thinks about you. Psalm 40, I don't have time to talk about the structure, but the middle of this psalm, according to the structure, is verses 9 and 10. And it says this: I have told the glad news of deliverance in the congregation. Behold, I have not, get this, restrained my lips. As you know, O Lord, I have not hidden your deliverance within my heart. I've told people about it. I have spoken of your faithfulness and your salvation. I have told people about your faithfulness. I've told people about your salvation. And it says, I have not concealed your steadfast love and your faithfulness from the great congregation. I think right here is a demonstration of what you do if you think that God has forgotten you. If you think that he's silent, if you think he's not listening. In those moments, instead of basking in that negative thought, instead, this is what you should do. You should start telling other people what God has done for you. If you feel like that he's forgotten you, make sure that he knows that you have not forgotten him. Does this make sense? Are y'all with me? Make sure that he knows you haven't forgotten him. Now, theologically, you know he hasn't forgotten you. I just told you that. His thoughts are always on you. But if you want to get out of that rut or in thinking that God has forgotten you, start testifying. Go up to somebody, even if you know them, even if they've heard this story 1,000 times, say, can I just take a moment to tell you what God did for me? Back when I was 8 years old, he pulled me up out of the pit and he saved my soul. Or you come home and you tell your spouse something great that God has done for you. Maybe the day before. Maybe when you were really feeling him. Maybe when you thought he was really active in your life. But you come up with the story. You come up with the story and you tell a story that's true, that happened to you, and you testify of what God is doing for you. See, I can do that this morning. And actually, we should be able to do this all the time. Let me give you a couple. First of all, I've had a weekend with my daughter and Brady. Had a weekend. And we've gone around to different farms to figure out where we're going to have this, wedding. And I say we very lightly because I have nothing to do with it. I'm just writing the check. That's all I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. That's my job, keeping track of the expenses. Aurora, Brady, going to determine who and where, right? But it's been a great weekend. We were out in God's creation yesterday, looking at different places. And God has done a great job with this world. It's fallen, and it still looks good. It's not exactly like this, but it's kind of like a 1999 Honda Accord that just keeps going, though it keeps smelling like oil. It just keeps going, right? The paint looks good. It runs, it sounds good, but you smell the oil. That's kind of like creation is in its fallen state. I mean, it's just a beautiful creation, but there's some issues. I mean, like when we went out to the property, there's some stuff that needs to be cleaned up because of the fall, right? But I'd say it is a beautiful creation. And it is awesome that my daughter's getting married. I just think that's absolutely incredible that she found a nice guy. And every father in this room knows what I'm talking about. You want your daughter to find a nice guy. That's what you want. That's the desire of your heart. So that's awesome. Another thing I could praise the Lord about is our staff. I recently bought a Lego spider. It's about this big. And I've placed it at various spots in the office to scare the women. All but one of them was scared. Katie, scared. I heard, that sort of deal. Ashley, she's not here, but she got a little scared. She opened up a cupboard, and there he was. He was big in the cupboard, right? Emily, that's a country girl right there. She went, oh, and just picked him right up. No, not scared at all over this little Lego spider. He actually looks kind of real in certain lighting, doesn't he, Katie? Yeah, until you kind of do it. I'm telling you that to say this. I am thankful that I work at a place where we can have fun with each other. Wouldn't you like to work at a place where you can have fun with each other? Where you're close to the people that you work with? That is a blessing. And one of the things that makes the staff here close, including the one that's retired, because we talk about you all the time, Robin, like technological and different phrases that you say. Yeah, the thing that makes us close is that we have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And that's what our relationships revolve around all the time. So you start testifying about things like that. Like, I'm thankful for the relationships I have that are good Christian relationships. I'm thankful for my daughter that's found a good Christian guy to marry. I'm thankful for God's creation. And before too long, you are no longer trying to figure out if God has forgotten you. You're trying to figure out how to praise him more. Are you tracking? Because if you think he's forgotten you, what you have stopped doing is praising his holy name and giving him thanks for the blessings that he has given you. Because once that starts, you don't even think about whether or not he's forgotten you. You think about, what else can I say about him to lift up his name next? And that is the point of this passage. I have told the glad news of deliverance in the congregation. Behold, I have not restrained my lips, as you know, O Lord. I have not hidden your deliverance within my heart. I have spoken your faithfulness and your salvation. I have not concealed your steadfast love and your faithfulness from the great congregation. And then I'm just going to have to, just for the last, just appease me a minute, okay? At the very end of this, in verse 16, at the very end, I will say continually, great is the Lord. Great is the Lord, and worthy to be praised. Let's pray.